The restaurant was alive in that quiet, ordinary way that only small-town places ever truly were. The hum of conversation never rose too high, yet it never fully disappeared either. It lingered like a steady rhythm, carried by clinking glasses and the soft scrape of chairs against the tiled floor. Becky stood beside the table, her fingers lightly gripping the edge of a chair. She did not sit right away. There was a hesitation in her posture, something subtle but present, as though her body needed a moment to agree with itself before committing to stillness. Just so you know, I had the chicken tacos last night, and my stomach has been doing somersaults ever since, she said, her voice calm but edged with discomfort. But the specials look good. We have tilapia, which I think is just a polite way of describing a greasy white fish floating in cheese. Dan did not even glance up. Please do not make me picture that. Darlene, however, leaned in closer to the menu. Her curiosity sharpened. Now that you mention it, that is exactly what I want. I am going exotic tonight. Beck. There was something about the way she said it that suggested she was not really interested in the food itself, but in the idea of choosing something unexpected. Neil cleared his throat gently, holding the menu with careful attention. I will have the pupusas, he said, pronouncing the word with quiet precision. Take me away to El Salvador. Darlene tilted her head. That is fried, and it is covered in something that looks like a chunky sauce. I cannot do that right now, Becky replied, her hand briefly pressing against her stomach again. You go first. Neil. I am still deciding. Neil nodded and returned to the menu, though it was clear he had already made up his mind. I would love the 3 shrimp tacos. Pick something else, Darlene said immediately, without even looking at him. Neil blinked, unsure whether she was serious. A lot of shrimp is peeled under questionable conditions. She continued, her tone casual but pointed. People think they are ordering something nice, but they do not really think about where it comes from. Neil shifted slightly in his seat. I had not thought about that. I have an idea, he added after a moment. What if I just had 1 small shrimp taco and felt appropriately guilty about it? Becky tried to smile. Have the chili relleno. They are very good here. And they are vegan. Neil smiled politely, though it did not fully reach his eyes. I do not think I like those. You will, Darlene said with quiet certainty. Dan finally lowered his menu. Would you all hurry up? I am riding a very specific wave of hunger right now. I will have a shrimp burrito. And I will also have Neil's shrimp tacos. Neil looked confused. I am sorry. What? Dan shrugged. I do not know what is in them, but they taste good. Becky exhaled slowly. I am not convinced this is food poisoning. Darlene glanced at her. I think you are hungover. I am not hungover, Becky said, though the certainty in her voice did not match the uncertainty in her expression. Dan pointed his fork in her direction. You are going to have to eat something. You and I have a meeting later. The word meeting seemed to drift past Becky without fully landing. Neil leaned forward slightly, trying to steer the conversation into safer territory. So, what do you do for a living? Dan asked. I am a preschool teacher. Neil replied. Dan nodded. Preschool. So that is like playing with blocks and things. Neil smiled, this time more genuinely. Blocks are actually very important. They help children develop spatial awareness and creativity. Darlene smirked. The old ways are still the best ways. We try to encourage imagination through open-ended objects. Neil continued. Things that do not tell the child what they are supposed to be. Dan leaned back. Why would you do that when there is television? Neil paused, unsure how to respond. Excuse me, Becky said suddenly, rising from her seat a little too quickly. I just need a moment. She walked away, her steps measured but slightly unsteady. At the table, silence settled in. Darlene leaned closer to Dan. He is great. Right. Dan shrugged. He seems fine. Does he remind you of anybody? Dan thought for a moment. Not really. Here's a clue. Darlene said. I want you to figure it out. Dan frowned. David. No. Darlene said quickly. Completely different. Dan glanced toward the hallway where Becky had disappeared. Then he looked back at Neil, who was carefully folding his napkin again. Wait. Dan said slowly. That was not David. No. Darlene replied. But it feels familiar. Does it not? Meanwhile, Becky stood alone near the restroom mirror. The fluorescent light above her flickered once, then steadied. She looked at her reflection. Her face. Her eyes. The subtle tension she had been ignoring all evening. She placed her hand on her stomach again. This time not as a reaction, but as a question. Something had changed. Not just in her body, but in the direction of her life. And in that quiet moment, with no one else around, the thought finally formed clearly. Later that night, when the noise had faded and the world had settled into something softer, she would speak the words out loud. I am pregnant. The sentence did not echo. It simply existed. And with it, everything began to shift. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the slow, steady way that real change always does. In the days that followed, laughter would still fill the house. Arguments would still happen over small things. Coffee would still be poured too early in the morning. Life would continue. But beneath it all, something new had taken root. Something uncertain. Something fragile.